So guys, for 6 years, Nick Sirianni has been coaching this team through everything, and somehow the man still can't get the credit he deserves because everybody jumps to Howie Roseman. Like Sirianni is just some guy standing on the sideline with a headset. 2 Super Bowls, 5 playoff appearances, a 59-26 record, and still, nobody wants to give this man his flowers. And now, The Athletic's Mike Silver went digging into why Sirianni refuses to change who he is no matter how much heat he takes, and what Sirianni said in response was a straight-up shocking statement that nobody saw coming. And the moment Saquon Barkley heard it, he immediately fired back with his own take that makes this whole thing even bigger. What's up, Birds Gang? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Eagles. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So, let me start with the statement itself because, honestly, this is what everybody's talking about right now. Mike Silver sat down with Nick Sirianni and basically asked him the one question that has been floating around Eagles Nation for years. Why won't you change? Why won't you tone it down, clean it up, be a little more polished? And you know what Sirianni said? He said, F that, you've got to be you. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. This is a head coach, 6 years into the job, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 championship, and he is sitting there telling the world, I am not changing for anybody. Not for the media, not for the fans, not for anybody. And honestly, I kind of respect that. Because here's the thing, the criticism around Sirianni has never really been about his record. Like, you cannot look at 59 wins and 26 losses and tell me this guy doesn't know what he's doing. But the way this team gets covered, the way people talk about the Eagles, Sirianni is always the last person who gets any credit. It starts with Howie Roseman. Everyone acts like Howie is running the whole show. He is the genius. He is the one nailing every draft. He is the one who always fleeces every other team in the league. And look, I am not sitting here saying Howie hasn't done a great job because he has. But the moment something goes right on the field, people jump straight to the GM and act like the head coach wasn't even involved. And then it goes to the assistants. You know how many times I've seen people give more credit to the coordinators than to Sirianni himself? The offensive coordinator changes almost every single year, and somehow that becomes the story instead of the fact that Nick has managed to keep this team winning through all of that chaos. Brian Johnson gets hired, Brian Johnson gets fired. Kevin Patullo comes in. Before that, Shane Steichen leaves to become a head coach. And through all of that turnover, through all of that instability on the offensive side of the ball, Sirianni is still standing there, still winning, still getting his team to the playoffs. But does he get credit for that? Nope, not really. And you know what makes it even harder for him, I think, is the way he came into this job. People never fully bought in from the start, right? There was always this feeling like, okay, he was not exactly the first choice, he kind of got the job, and people were like, let's see how this goes. And that narrative has never really gone away. Even after everything he has accomplished, there is still a segment of Eagles Nation that feels like they are just waiting for the one thing to go sideways so they can say, see, we knew it, we need somebody else. And that is honestly kind of tough to watch as a fan because this man has earned way more than that. And now look, the lowest point was obviously after that 2023 season. The Eagles started 10-1 and then just completely fell apart. Lost in the wild card round, it was ugly, and everybody was calling for Sirianni's head. And what happened? They didn't fire him, but it was not exactly a clean situation either. Assistants got changed, and from the outside, it looked like those were not even Nick's decisions. So when things go great, he doesn't get the credit. And when things fall apart, he is the first one people want gone. That is just not fair, man. But here's what Sirianni is basically saying with this statement. He is saying, I know all of that, I see all of that, and I don't care, because if I tried to be somebody else for 6 years, people would see right through it. And he is absolutely right about that. The guys inside that building, the players, the staff, they know exactly who Sirianni is. They love him for it. You cannot fake that kind of trust for 6 straight years. It just doesn't work that way. And honestly, Saquon Barkley kind of proved that point perfectly. Because when Saquon heard all of this noise around Sirianni, he didn't stay quiet. He came out and said Sirianni doesn't get enough credit at all. What he has been doing is legendary. I mean, think about that for a second. Saquon Barkley, one of the biggest names on this roster, is out here using the word legendary to describe his head coach. That is not something players say just to be nice. That is a guy who has been inside that building, who has seen how Sirianni operates up close, and is telling the world, this man deserves way more than what he is getting. And when Saquon says something like that, you have to listen. Okay, now let's talk about Jalen Hurts because things are kind of weird around him. There was this ESPN piece that came out about Jalen talking about some of the things that went wrong offensively last year and some of the interactions between coaching and playing. When Howie Roseman was asked about that ESPN piece, his answer felt a little off. It felt more like, hey, that didn't come from us, rather than, hey, nobody should be writing that about our quarterback. And apparently that did not sit well with Hurts and the people around him. Because if you go back and look at how the organization handled a similar situation with Carson Wentz years ago, soon now, it was completely different. With Wentz, they had him doing a press conference with reporters within days to clear the air. They were visible, they were loud, they made it clear they had their guys back. This time around, the reaction was much quieter, much more passive. And when you are Jalen Hurts, and you have been through everything this man has been through, Chamian, you notice that. The people around you notice that. And that disconnect between how Hurts was handled versus how Wentz was handled. That is a real conversation that needs to be had. Now look, I am not saying Jalen Hurts is unhappy or that he wants out or anything like that. That is not what this is. But I think what this whole situation shows is that even the best players on the best teams sometimes feel like they are not getting the support they deserve. And honestly, that kind of sounds familiar, right? Because we just spent the last few minutes talking about a head coach who has been dealing with that exact same feeling for 6 straight years. Nick Sirianni not getting his credit. Jalen Hurts not feeling fully backed by the organization. There is a pattern here, and Eagles fans need to pay attention to it. And look, thing about Jalen Hurts that I keep coming back to. Look at everything this guy has been through, not just in Philadelphia, but going all the way back to college. The changes, the criticism, the noise. And he is still here, still thriving. All he does is win. He wins at as high a level as basically anybody in this league. And yet it feels like people are always looking for a reason to question him. Always waiting for something to go wrong. Just like they do with Sirianni. Honestly, those two have more in common than people realize. And maybe that is exactly why they work so well together. Now, I want to discuss the roster because there is a lot happening there too. On the wide receiver side, Devontae Smith is your clear number 1 going into this season. And honestly, he is in for a monster year in terms of targets and receptions. With A.J. Brown gone, the ball is going to Devontae, and I think he is more than ready for that role. Behind him, you are looking at a mix of Mekhi Lemon, Dontavion Wicks, and Hollywood Brown. Lemon is going to work a lot out of the slot in 11 personnel. Wicks is the guy the organization really wants to step up because he is here beyond this season. Hollywood Brown is more of a one-year piece. And honestly, by the end of the year, I think Lemon ends up as your second leading receiver at that position. And then there is Tank Bigsby, who I think fits this new offense really well. He is a one-cut runner, and with the wide zone scheme they are running, that style is a perfect match. Think about how Bijan Robinson was used last year. Bigsby could carve out a similar complementary role here. On the defensive side, Moro Jomo is entering the final year of his deal, and this is a massive year for him. 6.5 sacks last year, real pass rush ability. If he blows up this season, he could hit the free agent market and get paid like Milton Williams or Jalen Phillips got paid. So do not expect him to take a team-friendly deal right now. He has too much to prove and too much money potentially waiting for him. And then you have the Jalen Hunt versus Nolan Smith situation at the edge. Jalen Hunt had an unbelievable second year, and his versatility makes him the guy this organization wants to build around. Nolan Smith has battled injuries and is more of a prove-it guy at this point. If Nolan cannot stay healthy and produce, he could become a trade candidate. Simple as that. And finally, let's not forget, Saquon does not have much left on his contract after this season. So this could genuinely be his last year in Philadelphia. Which means this whole Eagles roster picture, from Hurts to Saquon to Devontae to Jomo, it is all building towards something right now. And with Sirianni standing firm, refusing to change, silencing every single critic with one bold statement, I think this team is ready to make some noise again. Stay tuned, Eagles Nation. This season is going to be something else.